Folks, we're ready to get started. My name is Aljamal Binding. I'm the chair of the board of Movement Omaha for Race Equity, which is a group that deals with anti-racism and racial issues and trying to improve racial conversations and education about some of the disparities in our community and in our country and so on. Today we have a special guest with us, Suzanne Dau. She's been on our program a number of times, talking about different issues and so on. And she's talked about some of these issues related to culture and race and diversity issues. We've explored her work with youth, and also she's done a lot of support for youth in sports. She is actively engaged in the LGBTQ plus community and other volunteers endeavors. Suzanne has supported youth at Northwest High, where her children has attended there. And also she shared with us some of the opportunities and challenges she faces as a parent. And we invited her to talk about those issues and the ways they help improve parent, volunteers, and community engagement in the public schools. And we know that's been a challenge over the years in terms of our experiences living in this community. We also understand there's a serious gap with graduation rates of African American students, and that recently came out in the media that is becoming worse in terms of the numbers are not as good as they used to be. We also are talking about some of those other underlying issues that deals with why students fail or somewhat, and what administration and taxpayers can do to help transform educational system that, again, does a bit of gaslighting and not always honest about what goes on. First, Suzanne, share with the audience a little bit over your background and why this topic is important to you.
So I grew up in a small town, excuse me, in Iowa. Lived in the Midwest through my mid-20s, at which time for my career, I spent several years in Wichita, Kansas, Atlanta, Georgia, and eventually Phoenix, Arizona. In Phoenix, when my son was born in 2005, my husband at the time and I decided to move closer to family. We evaluated several cities in the Midwest, and we ended up settling on Omaha. We liked the size, we liked the cultural side that it offered, the diversity that it offered, and for me, it had an airport because I knew I'd be traveling frequently for work. When we moved, we flew in. We had 5 days to find a place to live, and we were working with a real estate agent we had not met prior, but had lived here in Omaha her whole life. As the first few days went by, we continued to look at homes, which I considered West Omaha, but we continued to be assured this is where the best schools, the best neighborhoods, etc. were. Now, I had done my research. I had amassed data, built spreadsheets of school districts, graduation rate, state test scores, and what we felt was most important, diversity by district. Growing up in the Midwest, but living in the cities that we had, exposing our children to other cultures at a young age was extremely important to us. As luck would happen, we stumbled upon a house in Northwest Omaha that was in the OPS district. When I say stumbled, I mean stumbled. We were driving down the street and happened to see a real estate agent nailing a sign in a yard. A sale had fallen through. She was just getting ready to relist the house. Long story short, we jumped on a plane, signed a contract, and landed in Phoenix, learning that we had secured the house and moved a few weeks later. My experience with OPS is my son and daughter going through Sunny Slope, Morton Middle School, and Northwest High School. We also helped sponsor a refugee family from Myanmar for 2 years who had 4 children in different OPS schools. I handled the education for the family, including attending back to school nights, open house, parent-teacher conferences with them. Their children attended Druid Hills, Fullerton, McMillan, and Northwest.
By the way, let me interrupt you. How many years did your kids attend OPS when you moved here? How many years would you say that was?
Well, I moved here, I mean, their whole school, their whole education. I moved here.
Okay. So it was not like this
recently. My son went kindergarten to 12th grade through OPS. My daughter is kindergarten through sophomore, sorry. And then my experience with the refugee family. And then 2 years ago, I also became guardian of a child at Northwest High School. So experienced Northwest through his eyes as well.
Gotcha. I understand. You know, recently it was published in an online newspaper and electronic media that academic issues have fallen OPS more, as I alluded to earlier in introduction. The graduate ratio declining. Administrators oftentimes, particularly what they had in the paper, some tepid, lukewarm, milquetoast response answer about what they're going to do about this dismal data or this reversal. And you hear people say COVID may have had something to do with it also, the decline. My question is, what quick and long-range solutions you offer based on your students' experiences in the public schools can help us improve and maybe reverse some of those trends that we're seeing now?
So I'll start with, I am not a teacher and I'm not a school administrator. So I honestly, I don't know what the right answer is here. I do believe through my experiences, there has to be a balance of graduating kids while ensuring they leave high school with enough knowledge and skills to go further, whether that's secondary education or employment. My fear is that we are so focused on graduating students that we forgo ensuring that they are prepared for post-high school education and life in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll say, Ajmal, although we'll get into a little bit more of it, even through the experiences that I've had with OPS, if I had to do it again, I would still choose OPS.
Okay.
Um,
By the way, give me a little clarity on that because I don't want to be extremely negative, which I am sometime with them. But there are people who have great, wonderful experience. Why would you choose OPS?
um, because I chose OPS initially because I wanted my children in a diverse school district. And when I say diversity, I don't just mean, skin color and race. I mean socioeconomic.
Okay.
My children are fortunate enough to be raised in a, upper middle class household. And so, and I was not. And so I want them to understand the differences in our society and why um, it's so imperative for us to be involved in community.
Gotcha. Gotcha. The other question I have is, are you open to, we might be open to, we might be busting up a can of worms, we say here. After one conversation, you spoke of a credit recovery program implemented by OPS. I didn't know they even had things like that. At least they didn't have it when I was in school. They made us stay back a year or semester, whatever. What is that all about, and why is it relevant to this interview, this credit recovery program?
So credit recovery, I have been told by a few different people that OPS has actually improved the program this last year. I really can't confirm that because I don't have a student any longer in it. My experience started with credit recovery during the 21-22 school year. Uh, when I became the legal guardian of this young man who was a sophomore at Northwest. COVID had presented a challenge for this child in that second semester of his sophomore year. He had failed the majority of high school classes to that point.
Wow.
After meeting with school officials, we were assured we could get the child on track through summer school and credit recovery. We did get through both programs over the next 2 years, and I am very proud to say this child graduated this spring with their graduating class. The credit recovery experience, however, was eye-opening for me. Credit recovery is where a student who has failed a class can retake it in a somewhat crash course type of way. As an example, where a student taking biology would typically spend a full class year doing so, in credit recovery, which is typically a couple of hours a week, twice a week, a couple of hours, 2 times a week, a student can get through a year of biology in a few weeks. And speaking to other parents at Northwest, I quickly learned that for some students, credit recovery had unfortunately become the easy way out. Some had learned that you did not have to care all year long because if you could focus for a few weeks, you could still pass the class and it was all good. Now, I do know when a student passes a class through credit recovery, they do receive the credits for graduation, but their GPA is not affected like it would be if they had taken the full class.
So explain that a little bit. What does that mean? I don't understand when you say is they get the credit to graduate, but
They get the graduation credit so that they can still graduate, but it doesn't impact their GPA score like taking the regular class. But I don't know if it impacts it a little bit or not, but it's more of a pass-fail type
okay,
situation
that
than
that
it
makes
is.
sense. That makes
So unfortunately for the kids choosing the credit recovery route, they often don't really have a full understanding of why GPA is important, especially if they want to go beyond high school. And so it becomes this thing, this everlasting. I mean, having 2 other students at Northwest at the time who were both went through honors biology, it actually became a challenge for me to get them to understand why spending a year taking a class like biology or geometry was better than taking it in 3 weeks and getting it done. of course my kids, took the full year classes, but that mindset was pretty common of, just fail the class and then pick it up during credit recovery and get it done in a few weeks, especially the classes that students considered harder, right? That they knew were going to be a challenge. In my case, every time I brought this up as a concern, whether it be to the administrators, to teachers, to other parents, I felt like I received the same answer every time, which was, it's okay. There are schools out there that will accept lower GPAs.
When you say schools, you mean like post-secondary universities and colleges
Mm-hmm.
or trade
That'll
schools or
accept
whatever?
that'll accept a high school student that has, say, a 1.5 GPA.
Which is equivalent to what, a D plus?
Yeah, pretty much.
Not a C. A C obviously would be a 3 or whatever. Okay, got you. Wow.
When I questioned, even like, to be honest, when I questioned even during the junior and senior year why this child had one or two like free periods, study periods, I guess is what they call them, every semester, when we were struggling with a 1.5 or a 1.8 GPA, sometimes lower than that. So I would question, why are we not putting this student in, at least into an elective, right? Throw them in art, throw them in something
Right.
that just to boost up that GPA so that we could actually apply for scholarships. Because if you're familiar with going to college and scholarships, you know that a 1.5 is most likely not going to get you any help going to school. And the message I consistently got told though was, it's okay, they're going to graduate, right? Like it was probably, to be honest with you, the most frustrating part of my experience in education was feeling like we're letting these kids down by not explaining and getting them to understand the importance of not just graduating, but the importance of grades. And
Right.
some students, I get it. Some students are not going to be A students, and that's okay. But we shouldn't accept below mediocre just because, well, we graduate them, so we get to check the box that says we send another student on.
So the reason I'm serious and I'm concerned that I haven't taught at a post-secondary institution, Metro Community College and Methodist College, I've seen students who come in, uh, and it's obviously they didn't have a good foundation. And oftentimes we got to be concerned, or we should be concerned, when you see large groups of them, particularly certain racial groups. And as I look at some of the people who are professionals, sometimes I see they can't write. Again, I'm not talking about your typical typos that we make, and that, but literally cannot write beside their signature. And I'm talking about people who got degrees who are functionally literate master's degrees. I'm like, how do you get through college or university? And so again, one of the concerns is if you don't deal with it now, it'll come back later in life and affect your opportunities to be able to be succeed as you move up your corporate or nonprofit ladder wherever you work at. But yeah, wow. So did they ever change anything based on your feedback, or where they interact with you? Did you see any changes in during your tenure dealing with this credit recovery program?
No, I no, but like I said, I have had a few parents tell me that the credit recovery program has been improved, that maybe it's not quite as easy to get through the classes now because I think they recognized, at least at the school, that it was becoming the way out for many students. I know, I mean, friends of my daughter that literally almost every class of the class year was done through credit recovery. I
Wow.
mean, like they go through a whole year, fail almost everything, and then they pick up one or two during summer school and the rest through credit recovery.
By the way, you have to pay for that. Is that free, or do you have to pay for those credit recovery courses? Are they free?
It was for us because of his situation, but I'm not, I think it's free, but
Okay.
I'm not positive.
As you mentioned that, when I was in college, which was a long, long time ago, I remember a guy named Nick. I don't remember his last name, but he literally dropped out because he was bored. He didn't like it, and then I think he took the equivalency exam and passed it flying colors in that. And later on, he ended up in Lincoln at the university. But I remember he was one of the guys who you're like, why would you drop out, or why would you? And his comment was he was just bored of school, didn't want to be there. But later on, he was able to take his high school equivalency exam flying colors. He's a very bright student. In actual fact, I met him initially when he was at Lewis and Clark, and he was at Central when he graduated. But again, I don't know. We're talking many years ago. About a year ago, you encountered an issue with foreign language, and we talked about that a little bit. when your daughter was a student. Could you share your thoughts on whether the current foreign language class is inadequate for this community? Again, there are some of us who are African Americans who love to see more African courses dealing with languages on the continent. Some people say Swahili, Xhosa, Igbo, you name it. But my question back to you is, what about the foreign language that's going on in OPS? What do you think about it with some of your experiences?
So this is literally probably the biggest running joke in my household, um, because our experience with it almost became comical. I'll start by saying, I'm of an age that when I graduated high school, foreign language was not a thing. I mean, it was an offering, but it certainly wasn't a requirement. And so I didn't take it. And so kind of like I wanted my kids in a diverse school. I was very insistent that my kids were going to learn a foreign language because and I really hoped for Spanish because after living in Arizona, I just really wanted. I felt like that was a big skill that I had missed out on in my younger life. So when my son went through Morton, they did not offer Spanish as a full class. It was a weird, like you got a quarter of French and a quarter of Spanish, and it
He,
was like
he, he collected a little smorgasbord of all languages.
it was like a little introduction. But then when my daughter came through Morton, they had changed it to match the other OPS middle schools, and so she was told, you can take Spanish 1, 2 here at the eighth grade level, so that when you hit your freshman year, you can take 3, 4. And we knew that it took 2 years. I mean, most D1 schools want 2 years of foreign language, right? So she went ahead and took the 1, 2. She signed up for 3, 4 at Northwest. But what we failed to understand, and I don't think this was lack of telling us, we probably just didn't connect the dots, was that you have to have 2 years at the high school. So it wasn't 2 years total. You have to have 2 years at the same school. Okay. So again, my daughter's like, okay, that's cool. I'll just take 5, 6 because they offer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My son had planned to take all 4 years in high school. And so she was like, I'll just go through all three as well. Only to find out that Northwest was pulling Spanish 5, 6, and 7, 8 from the curriculum. So it became this, okay, so now what do we do? Because she's already got 2 years of Spanish under her belt. And our options were you can start over. They suggested Chinese because they did offer Chinese 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. She could do 2 years of German. We could transport her. I could transport her to Metro every day, and she could take the class at Metro. Which, as you know, is well, because I live by you, Ajmal, not very close to my house, right? And so, as a working parent, I wasn't sure how I'd be able to just leave and drive all the way across town every day to get her to a class. And so,
Meaning you would have to pick her up in high school and take her down to Metro to take the class and bring her back
mhm.
every day?
Well, I don't know if it would have been every day, but a couple of 2, 3 times a week probably.
Hmm.
So then I went to the administration, said, I know Burke offers 6, 7, 8 or 5, whatever, and Burke's actually our homeschool. So can I pick her up at Northwest and bring her to Burke because it's all right in my little neighborhood? And they said no, OPS doesn't allow you. So I could drive her to Metro to take a class, but I can't pick her up and bring her over to Burke to take an OPS class that Northwest should be offering, but they just couldn't find teachers.
Wow, wow, wow. So how do you
Um,
resolve this then? What was a quick fix for this? Because we're kind of chasing a little time here. How do you fix it though? How do you
she, well, long story short, she's not going back to Northwest this year. I mean, that was one of the final, um, that was one of the final straws for us.
Hmm.
Um,
Wow.
the other thing I real quickly, I'll hurry here. OPS introduced the career pathways a few years ago. Um, I know there are some people that are big fans of it. I'm not a fan of it at all. I think well, it destroyed my son's high school plans. My son was a very methodical. He had planned out his 4 years of high school. He knew what he wanted to do in life, and it involved the trades. And then when OPS introduced the career pathways his sophomore year, they took out all of the trade classes from Northwest. And said, well, your only option is to go down to tech and apply at the resource center. he applied the very day they told him to do that, and they said, "Oh no, we're full on at TAC. We can put you on a waiting list a year from now." And he
That's frustrating.
the experience my son had became the topic of many of his essays for scholarships. His experience of having to completely refocus his high school career because they didn't want to offer basic shop classes, and wouldn't let him go to Burke to take him without transferring, like literally transferring high schools. Um, and
That's
so now he is actually enrolled, and he's going on a full ride scholarship to pursue what he wanted to do in high school, but had
wow.
to reroute. And
You know,
yeah,
one that was we're kind of chasing time with, and Suzanne, I wanted to go on a side note. We're curious about the dedication you, and I know you've shared with me your volunteers and your colleagues who've been doing things and supporting the boys basketball team and so on. Could you, and one of the questions you told me you actually provided food or stuff to help some of these young kids and something to have a meal. And then my question was, what was that like? And then how much did you spend? And I think you said there's another colleague who put a lot of money for it to help feed these young men after their sports or doing their sports events.
yeah, Ajmal, I've always been involved. It's not just a Northwest thing. I have served on every PTSO, like every school that my kids have been in. I have provided teacher meals for every parent teacher conference between kindergarten and senior year.
Well, hold on. Are you saying when I see teachers smacking at the conference and getting some food, parents are the one who bring that food up to those teachers?
100%. Well, yes, and I know, but I do it because I want to. I mean, like that.
I
Those
didn't know
were,
that when my kids was in school. I thought they sent someone out for a pizza run or whatever, but
well,
I didn't
maybe
know their
some
parents
schools,
are.
but not
I didn't know that was
not
happening. I didn't know that parents are, who supplied that. I just took for granted they did that on their own. Okay, go ahead.
um so so being involved has always been part. I mean, it's just been what I do. But when my son got to high school and there was football and we were going through the summer, I found out that the coaches for the football team the previous year had been basically going on Friday afternoons to the grocery store and buying loaves of bread and like peanut butter or lunch meat, and then they would just bring that back, and that's what they would feed the boys before the football games. And so I was pretty much like, that's not going to be my son's experience in high school. And so I found just a couple of parents, and we started busting asses and trying to provide meals. Um, by the time my son was a senior, we had a few more parents, and then they had a new coach come in who actually like donated some money himself, which was a big help. And the previous coach tried. I mean, I the athletic coaches at Northwest are what kept my kids at Northwest.
Wow.
They impacted their lives in such a positive manner that I owe them much gratitude. But um, it I mean, I did it. His whole high school career, I took 4 hours of vacation every Friday during football season, and I would go up to that high school and I would cook food and I would feed that team. We would sometimes get donations. Some families, and I get it, for a working family to come, to be able to bring in $30 or $50 a week,
Wait,
because
wait, I
you're
want to cut to
feeding
the
50
chase
to
if I can.
75 kids. These aren't small teams, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Susan, I want to cut to the chase I can. Well, how much monetary value, if you had to estimate, that they provided you and your colleagues to help these young men or people in these sports, or in terms of in a given year? I'm not talking about 1 month, but
I
a
think
given
the first year, the school probably gave us a couple hundred. Um, Again, the coach would always donate, and sometimes like the coach's family. I don't want to name names, but like the coach's family would come up and slide me a check, for a hundred
Oh,
dollars.
wow.
That put that towards one of the next
That is
weeks.
nice. That's good to hear.
Um, on average, it probably cost us, I don't know, 300 a week, 400 a week, depending,
Wow.
what we were serving, because we learned quickly that most of these kids, first, not most, for some of these kids, getting fed on Friday night was oftentimes the last like full meal they were going to get before they came back to school Monday.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And
Wow.
so we took it upon ourselves to ensure that they were not just getting a sandwich, that they were, we were bringing in pans of lasagna, and we were bringing
As I say,
taco
regular food
bars, and
and not peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that we sometimes
yeah.
had to live on when we were low
And
income.
then when they would have away games, we would actually pack up sack lunches, and with sandwiches and chips and granola bars that we would then send on the bus, so that they would also have food coming
Susan,
home.
we're Chase. I want to ask you quickly. What did other schools district do? I mean, you're talking about Northwest. Was it different in other school districts? Did you observe them doing something differently? Do people from
Well, I
sports
don't
teams?
think it's any different at OPS. I think every OPS has the same issue. It's just maybe some OPS schools have parents that have more money, so
Okay.
it's an easier, right? It's they have more people contributing, so it's an easier lift. I do know some of the high schools that are in newer neighborhoods, and some of the non-OPS high schools, they have sponsors. There's one high school of somebody I know, a friend of mine, who had a restaurant who provided every meal,
Wow.
every meal. A
And this is
restaurant,
Omaha. This is Omaha, Nebraska, right?
yeah, a restaurant provided every meal for the football season.
Wow. Wow.
So I
Wow.
know a couple of schools that happens at, but when you're at Northwest, and the closest thing to you is a McDonald's on 90th and right. I mean, there's not
A lot of options. I understand that. Yeah.
the neighborhood collaboration isn't.
Right. Based on your experience and expertise in social context, do you think we can have interracial conversations and make changes in the public schools, considering your parent involvement or your engagement? Now, again, you're a little different, I think, than some other parents in terms of you're at Northwest. I don't think there's a lot of how many white students or white parents are at Northwest? Is there the minority? Are they in the minority there? The white
I
parents
don't
at
know if
North?
they're the minority, but it's pretty equal, I would say. And they have a high uh, Asian population,
At Northwest.
very high population. But it's where a lot of refugee families come. You know, um, I think we have to keep trying, Ajmal. I mean, we can't not try. Here's the thing. If you are a student at Northwest, if you are a student in OPS, I ain't even gonna say Northwest. If you are a student in OPS and you participate in any sports or arts program, you see the inequities.
Wow.
It's that simple. Teachers, TAC, administrators, community members, legislators, churchgoers, everybody can say it's all good and it's all, equity is there. But if you are a student, you see it firsthand, and it doesn't matter how many people tell you that it's not there, it is there. And if you are a parent of a student, you know it's there.
Wow. The
But you
disparities are there.
decide to live, but you decide that inequity is, well, for some of us, we decide that inequity is okay and that we're still going to fight the fight. And for many families, they don't have a choice because
Wow.
they don't have transportation. They have to send their child to the neighborhood school. Um, it as my experience has changed my mindset about legislative bills that um, want to provide funding to families, because I get it. I understand why some families would want to opt out, and they need help to do so.
And that reminds me of the free market environment where if you don't like something, you move on elsewhere if you can. And if you can't, you get stuck in that rat hole or that cesspool. And again, I know that some of these administrators and educators, kids go to parochial schools or they live in areas where you take a helicopter to get there. So they have different areas of town. And Bennington is a growing community because of their school system. People see it as one of the best ones in Omaha. I know back in the day, Central was the #1 school when I was in high school back in the day, and I don't think Central's that way today. And so it's one of those questions. We're getting down to the end where we open up to the audience, but I wanted to ask you one last question. Many participants are not aware of the thousands of volunteer hours you do and the good folks who help in this community, and even those who do good work at the school system. I'm not going to denigrate people who do good work because there are some good people who survive and do very well in that system. Why was that whole system important to you? And you said that you alluded to the diversity, but now that it's all over, would you do it all over again? And why is it important?
Yeah, my family was not. I mean, we lived on food stamps and stuff growing up, because my mom was a single mom. But it didn't matter. Like, we were involved always. It's just my mom, to this day, has a giving heart, and if she has $5, she'll give you 250. She
she,
um
you broke it down. She'll give you 250.
yeah, she she was always involved in school. She was always involved in outreach, and She was very heavily involved in church, but she was always heavily involved in the community, and just, I guess, ingrained in me, be kind and help others.
I hear
And
you.
so I hope, you know, I hope that, being at Northwest, and even for just a few short years, helping feed children and um, helping a few kids along the way, that I impacted somebody.
Good. So then we're going to open it up, and there's a number of questions already in the chat now. Maybe I'll read a couple of them to you, and then we can, if somebody want to raise their hand or go directly to talk to Suzanne, feel free to do that. One question: are there parent coordinators at these schools? Are there something like a parent coordinator who work in the schools that you're aware of? Have you ever heard of that term before in OPS? Never heard
No,
of it? Wow. I do
no.
know they had a
I
woman
mean,
in.
they may have somebody that does something like that, but I've not heard that term.
Okay. And then this other comment says, my daughter went to Central for her junior year. She had a teacher who could not even speak Spanish. She was so far behind that she dropped Spanish for her senior year. And
Yep.
is that sound like
No, yeah, oh yeah. I had parents tell me that their children were taking Spanish at Northwest, and the teacher didn't speak Spanish. They were using Duolingo.
what does that mean?
It's like some online app.
So all the all the Latinos, Hispanics, people from Central South America who are fluent in Spanish, OPS can't have enough brains or wherewithal to bring them in and help teach a course.
I said it every day. Go find a parent. Hell, there's got to be. There are people that would come in and help.
Wow. Somebody has their hand up there. Norman, you got a hand, you got a question directed for Suzanne. Norman, you got your mic on?
Yeah, okay. Good evening. Uh, Suzanne, I want to first say thank you for everything that you do for the students at Northwest and even your student, I mean your child, of course. You're going up and beyond for just anything that you've been doing. It's pretty amazing. One of the things I think I had a question to chat about the parent coordinators. What I've noticed a lot of schools that are running really well is for the most part, there's usually someone between the parents, the teachers, the school, and the students, right? Just for what you're trying to do, you're running around quite a bit, which is kind of abnormal for most schools, right? Most working schools, I would say most high-performing schools, or even schools that are, mid-performing, you have a parent coordinator in that. So that's someone who will talk to you, tell you what's going on in the sense of like, hey, our students are going to be here for today. This going on with the Spanish teacher, this going on with this and this, just so there's a communication in between both parties. So I think it's great that, of course, that you're getting involved and you're doing as much as you possibly could. I don't know if there could be a parent coordinator, or like I know the PTA president used to be a really big thing in OPS, probably unpaid position, but I do notice a lot of the schools that do perform well, they do have a parent coordinator in that. So I
So
think we
we
should.
did have a PTSO at Northwest. I served as the treasurer while I was at the high school. And last year, we were 5 members strong. 4 of us were single moms, and like February, March timeframe, we could absolutely not find anybody to step in and help us because three of the 5 had graduating students. It was a parent teacher organization. So it was intended when they like created the organization with the state, it was intended that school administrators would participate and teachers as well as parents, right? It was supposed to be where the 3 would come together and discuss exactly what you just said. This is where the students are going to be. This is what, we're going to be doing this push or in the school for the next few weeks or whatever. The first couple years I was at Northwest, we would have the principal come once or twice a year, and we probably had 2 or 3 teachers that would attend occasionally. And by the last year, we had a choir teacher that was amazing. He came every meeting. Didn't really know much about what was going on in the school because he was the choir teacher, but he was amazing and he supported us and we loved it. But my son's senior year, not one teacher administrator came anywhere, came one time, until in March, the PTSO sent a letter to the school and to the registered parents saying that if we did not have volunteers step up, we were disbanding through this attorney general. We were notifying the Secretary of State that we are no longer. The school got really upset, sent an administrator in for a couple of months and said, you can't do this, you can't disband. And we were kind of like, well, yeah, we can, because we have no one to take over these roles. If I'm not going to have a student at Northwest, I'm not going to stay treasurer. So they said, we're going to go find teachers, we're going to go find people to step up and do it. Long story short, May rolls around, they have nobody. And so we have disbanded. So, I mean, it's very unfortunate, but Northwest no longer has a parent-teacher organization because we just couldn't get, not even teachers. The 2 parents that were still going to be there next year would have stayed if they had just even come up with 2 teachers or 2 administrators to help. But you can't run that type of an organization with 1 or 2 parents. It's too much.
You know,
Yeah.
one of the things is that I find somewhat amazing is that organizations, when they get a hold of a volunteer or people in the community, they continue to develop that rapport. In other words, the service doesn't just stop there, but they continue that. So you would hope we would figure out how to continue to get people involved and stay involved, particularly if they're going to volunteer or help donate or support our system. Other feedback, other questions, other folks. Yes, say, go ahead.
Hi. I really, it saddens me the experience you had, because a high school experience for kids is so important and so easy to upend and ruin. And to have parent volunteers at all, you really need to take care of them. I am a substitute teacher for OPS. I taught in a different school district in town for 7 years, and chose not to sub at that district. But OPS, I really had heard all the bad stuff about OPS, and thought I'd give them a try anyway. And I've been to many high schools and never to Northwest though. And I've seen a lot of bad administration. I'm not going to say administrators, because a lot of times their hands are tied by the district.
Yep.
But the administration of schools is so important, and it really is a top-down thing. I have come to the point, this is my 3rd year with OPS, and I subbed at Benson for a long term and was so impressed with the administration there, starting with the principal, who I was talking to new freshmen this morning and was telling them, hey, if you have an issue, go to the principal. She's got your back. She respects everybody, and won't take any stuff. You'll hear the truth from her.
Wow.
And that's how she is. She's genuine. She's not reading a script about how to behave with this student or that. She's just genuine. And so I'm doing my best to only work there.
So I was going to ask you a quick question as you were sharing this. As a substitute teacher, and I'm wondering how this happened, because I do remember Tracy, one of the school board members, got on, one of the board members started monitoring teachers when they had a complaint to her. My question is, a substitute or someone that says, will you get in trouble? Can you talk to them like you're offering constructive feedback? Could they listen to that? Because you say,
Oh, yeah.
this is very good, but are there chances when you finish that you get to evaluate your placement wherever school you're at with somebody and say, how can we improve? Do they do any of that?
The only thing they do is ask you, and you can just not do it and nobody says anything, but they do ask you to answer a few questions, a little questionnaire about your experience.
Okay.
And it's just real basic stuff like, was there a sub plan? Did you
Okay.
have
More
lessons
administrative stuff then, but
materials?
got you. Okay, I understand. That makes sense.
Yeah. So but I'll say this, and to me, this was an incredibly unusual thing. My first year, my first long-term sub at Benson, I had an opportunity to take kids on a field trip paid for by somebody else. And they let me do it. I'm a substitute teacher, and they let me arrange a field trip.
which is good, which is nice.
Yeah,
I was,
and
go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it was well worth doing. It was a, you know, a good educational experience. But often you get that, I don't know what it is, big-headedness or territorial feelings or something that,
All right,
you know, for somebody else to suggest something,
good,
uh, you know, they can't handle that, a lot of people, but
good. Appreciate you. Thank you,
be
thank you,
there.
thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate it. So I'm gonna come back to you. As a parent, did you ever get invited or talked about like, did they do a survey with you, or what was your experience like for your kids? Now your kids are out of that system. They ever talked to you about some
Not
of the things that you're talking
not
about in a
since they
phone setting?
left, but again, I've been so involved in OPS from the beginning. So they used to. I don't think the current. I don't think Dr. Logan maintains the parents advisory board or whatever for
This
the
is the previous superintendent who left town on a broom.
district.
Okay, I
Yeah.
say it like that because just didn't do nothing for us as a whole. She's the first African American female
But from the
superintendent. Go ahead.
from the time my son was in kindergarten, I served on the district citizens advisory board. I think is what they called it, something like that. Where once a month, two representatives from every school in the district were invited down to TAC to participate in a meeting. And the intention was you would learn about things going on in the district, and then you would bring that back to your parent teacher organizations or the teachers or the administrators, right? Kind of the parent coordinator that Nomi mentioned. Um, and it was amazing. I loved it. Um, and I would go to these meetings and I would get information. You'll remember back because I remember talking to you about it back then, Ajmal, when I used to volunteer at my son's elementary school, and I think it was the first time I ever asked you about the school to prison pipeline because I was seeing patterns when I would go to the school to volunteer and I didn't like what I was seeing. Um, and that's when OPS went through that little phase where they were in all kinds of trouble for suspending
Oh yeah.
um, young kids. My son being one of them. My son was kicked out and suspended for a week
Wow.
in second grade. Um,
Wow.
insane. But it was good because I would go to those meetings and I would come back and I would schedule time with the principal and we would sit down and I'd say the district says they're changing the disciplinary. Right, are you aware of this? Have you been trained? Right, so it was open dialogue. But then, like I said, under the previous superintendent, they pretty much stopped them, right? I mean, and COVID hit, so that I mean, again, I don't. COVID hit, they went virtual, um, and then they just stopped altogether.
Well, they're still
And,
on the
and
COVID restrictions. I think the way they operate. Some of them got long-term COVID, and I think some of them may be affected. Not to be funny
so,
about.
because of that, though, I have been invited anytime there has been any kind of OPS panel. I can promise you, I've been invited. I have. I mean, when Dr. Logan came in, they invited a group of like 10 people to come down and meet and greet her and talk about the district. I was on the list, right? Because if there was a citizens meeting, if there was any kind of open meeting, there wasn't a person at TAC that didn't know who I was because
Mm,
I was in their face every time in a nice way. But I was that involved, whether it was curriculum, whether it was trans students' rights, whether it was um, sports. The last few years, the district would do stuff with like transportation, and so they'll say we're going to have a meeting at Northwest on this Merck, and you pick the school that you want to go to the meeting to. I can tell you, probably on one hand, the meetings that I went to where there was more than 2 or 3 people there, and there were meetings that I would go to at Northwest about topics like transportation, topics that should be critical,
right.
where I was the only parent that showed up, and there'd be 4 or 5 OPS district officials there to conduct a panel, and they'd be talking to me. It was I.
It reminds me of the NAACP was doing some survey at UNO, and I looked in the room. There was like 4
I
people, and they kept asking the same people the same question. It was kind of unfortunate because they didn't do their homework. They didn't. And this was the NAACP out of Lincoln. Why are you bringing the Lincoln NAACP to Omaha to do their work? But the other point, somebody has you, Susan. What are the top 3 advices you would give to these schools to do to deal with some of the issues you just shared?
I think it comes down to I think Sid nailed it. Administration at the top. the number of times that we were told, oh, it's a TAC thing, oh, it's a district thing, oh, our hands are tied. When you have a parent teacher administrator organization, and the high school has 8 administrators, and not one comes to a meeting, and you hold them every month throughout the year, why would a teacher show up? If it's not important for the administrators to be, if like in our PTSO, we were, I mean, fairly successful. We held fundraisers, you know, we donated a couple grand to the like food pantry at the school. They needed coats. We went and, you know, bought several $100s worth of coats that we gave. The PTSO did the post prom. So we would raise 3,000 every year for Northwest students to be able to have something to do post prom that was safe and secure. And I'll be honest, I don't know that we ever received a thank you.
Administrators.
Yeah, I don't ever remember. It was like, it's a, you know, this is your responsibility, even though there's only 4 of us doing it, right?
Wow.
And when we said, you know, this means there won't be a post prom next year, right? Like, I mean, disbanding the PTSO was not an easy decision. We cried over it, some of us, because bingo, Nomi, culture, right? It starts at the top. And if you don't have a culture of community, real quick, one more example. So my son played football all 4 years. And all 3 of his first years there, you know, the season builds up, and Northwest doesn't have much football team, but the season builds up and you get to senior night, right? It's the epitome of playing varsity football. Senior night, you get a walk out on the field with your parents, you get a rose or whatever the hell they hand out. They call your name, they talk about what you're going to do post high school. 3 years in a row, I watched Northwest do senior night football at 6:30 when the game started at 7. 3 years in a row, I watched senior football players walk out onto the field with no one in the stands, because Northwest is a working family school. And so parents are scrambling to get off of work, to get home, to get kids to get to a football stadium. And that stadium never had people in it before 5 to 7. 3 years, I watched that school do that. And I watched the devastation on those senior young men's faces when the visitor stands were full and there was nobody on the home side to clap or cheer them on, except their parents, if their parents came, and very few parents came.
Wow. Didn't know that.
So when my son was a junior, I started petitioning. I was like, that is not going to be his experience. I went to the principal, I went to the athletic director, I went to the administrators. We got to change this. I'll fund it. I'll give you, I don't care what we have to do, but I want my son to experience what I know a senior night is supposed to be. Please, please let us move it to halftime when you know there's going to, I mean, every other damn high school in the state does it at halftime. And they would say, well, no, Northwest always does it before the game. It doesn't matter. There's no one here to watch it. So, true story.
If I didn't know you better, I'm thinking you some of this stuff.
My son never missed a practice in 4 years. He was the team captain. He like during the summer practices when there would be 5 kids showed up, my kid was there every day. He football was his life. And on his senior night, there were 4 people in the stands when he walked out to be congratulated. 4 people.
You know, I find, you know, again, it's disheartening, it's heartbreaking, it's sad. And again, it's obvious administration, people in leadership don't hear, they have wax in their ears. But one of the things I will say, and I was at a meeting, I think at Wesley House years ago, and there was a principal, his name was John Baptiste. I guess he was originally from Louisiana with a name like that, African-American. And that was the first time I ever heard an administrator talk about the school failing or some negativity in a kind of a constructive way. Again, he wasn't bashing the district, but it was the first time I've ever seen an administrator in a community meeting doing working hours, talking to parents. I think it was funded or hosted by 360 or someone, but I remember it was just interesting to hear his honesty. And again, they were looking at some data on the achievement and the CAT scores, whatever they were doing with the kids, and he was just saying they were not doing as good. But he was probably the most honest administrator that I met. in my whole career in OPS, and he had a good relationship. And at some point, they tried to transfer to another school, and the parents rose up and they forced him to go. The parents forced that decision.
Did he have kids in the district?
I don't know, but I know the parents liked him so much that they didn't let him transfer to another school because they liked him a lot there. And I think the administrators may want to move him around like they do some of the priests. If you get too connected to your community or parish, sometimes they just move you around randomly and switch it up. And I don't know if there was malice involved in this case, but I do know the parents made the system reverse his transfer. But I just remember I said to him, people in the room, I've never met an administrator who worked for OPS who didn't act like a puppet or who act like a, they had a rehearsed speech. And he was honest and open. Like I say, I gave me a new vision of that. We got
You
about
said
10 minutes.
something-
Go ahead. Beg
You
your
said
pardon?
something earlier that I just want to mention. So my kids in throughout Sunny Slope, Morton, I think every school they were in, they had at least 2 principals during their tenure at each school.
Mm-hmm.
I am not aware of one principal that they served under, that they went to school under, that had their own kids in OPS.
Wow.
Not
Wow,
one.
wow, wow, wow.
And the number of people, the number of employees at TAC that send their kids out of the district is appalling. When we talk about it starts at the top, it starts at the top. And if you're not willing to send your own children to OPS, why should I trust you with mine?
Right. Well, we had that same philosophy in the food pantry business. If we wouldn't eat the food, don't give it to the poor. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we would not give anything to make sure we had
People try
quality
to bring
food
you
or whatever.
expired food
But
because, well, I can't eat it, but we'll let the poor people eat it.
yeah, yeah. Are some of the clowns in this city who come with rusty cans and donate them? We have to throw them right in the garbage. But again, it's a certain of standards that you have for anyone. If you're not going to eat it, don't do it. The other thing I was going to share with you is, and I must say, I remember Mr. Freeman when my kids were at Prairie Wind. Even before then, he was at the other school that they were at over off of 52nd and off of Ames there, about maybe 5 blocks south of Ames. But I used to tell administrators I would love to say something negative about the man from time just to be an advocate, but the guy was just the way he handled himself. And everyone that I know, even the people in the neighborhood that I moved in, they moved him out to Prairie Wind, had nothing but positive. It's probably one of the best administrator principals I've met in my whole career. And again, I grew up through OPS. My 4 children went through the system. And like I say, I could not think of anyone who was next to him in terms of his caliber and his output. And I don't say that lightly because I don't care for a lot of people who are dysfunctional. But the other thing I remember is he used to go out and stand in a state patrol type position before they start doing it. And I was impressed that here you got the principal out there helping make sure the kids are safe as they cross some of these busy streets, and particularly near 52nd Street over there by between Bedford and Ames. This could be a very busy street, but I was impressed with that. They say, then I started seeing more administrators come out and be kind of patrol folks. Folks, we got about 8 minutes left. I'm gonna give other people a chance who haven't said anything. I know there's been some quiet people here. Is there any question you want to ask Suzanne Dau? And Suzanne has a lot of experience of being in the school system. I know we don't do a lot of opportunities where we talk about it, but are there other feedback, questions, comments you want to make? One question somebody asked: are there parents involved? Are there other parents? Are there other parents involved that you're aware of?
I don't want to say names, but my little crew, we had a little football crew at the end that was like, there was probably 4 or 5 of us, right? That carried the burden. And some of them, it was, they just had the time to show up and help us, which was, it was one thing to fund the meals, but another thing to be up there and actually serve 50 to 75 people, right? But yeah, the PTSO, like I said, it was 5 of us moms, 4 of us single working parents, doing things like planning post prom and teacher meals. And we provided 4 teacher meals a year. So we always did 1 meal at the start of the school year. We did one right before Christmas for the holidays. And then each parent teacher conference, we provide a meal. And then during Teacher Appreciation Week, we would do things like bring in Coffee Joe and give teachers, coffees. And one year, I think we brought in some masseuses to like give them little chair massages. Yeah.
One thing I want to say is that I wrote to the parent, the person in charge of community engagement, the individual who I know from working at Promise Ship didn't get back to me, didn't respond, no phone calls. And so one of the things I'm really concerned about is if they can't get back to someone like me who would call their names out. And also I had a person who was on our former board who didn't respond back to the letter. Again, I assume they got the letter. They didn't come back to my return address. But there's some of these administrators who are so arrogant and just outright have a certain level of disrespect for community people and parents, but yet they want increases in their salary. And I think that Matt Ray, I know under his watch, they got rid of the human relations department inside the school, and it looks like they need to bring back some people who have some common sense and some parent engagement and people who know how to relate to parents and do some of the things that we talked about today. But again, you can't sit around and whine and complain about more money if you're giving the money to the wrong administrators or giving it to the wrong people who are not helping our students in our community. So we really need to get the school district to not just game up, or you're going to see a lot of people want to get out of it. And so,
Well, and it's such a crazy concept, right? Employee engagement, right? If you work for any company anywhere in the country, employee engagement is a thing. I mean, companies invest money into it. Employees are surveyed. I mean, we survey our employees 2-3 times a year, right, to gauge engagement, because when engagement goes down, this is exactly what happens. And so, there are plenty of people out there. It's very curious to me that OPS has not been able to figure out engagement, even teacher engagement. I mean, hell, let's not even start at the parents. Teachers, get the teachers engaged.
Part of it, I said, look at the functionaries who've been there for so many years who think you control people by dictatorial, authoritative mentality. We're down to the last 5 minutes or so, and Susan, I want to give you a chance. Any closing comments? Because I'll close out the program at some point. But anything you would give advice for us so that we don't have this difficult or this challenging experience as parents, taxpayers, and now they're debating the state taking over school when they got $1 billion deficit in their pension fund. And so I know some of the teachers are worried about that. But any closing comments you'll make about the state of how we can do something different? Because I don't want to end always on a negative note, even though this district makes us do that.
As a parent, you have to be involved. I know it's hard for some parents, but that also sometimes I think becomes an excuse for some parents. I mean, you have to be involved. Show up for the meetings. Show up for your kids' football game. Show up for your kids' basketball game. And from a district level, OPS needs to do more community engagement, right? I mean, if the Citizens Advisory Board was a successful endeavor, I remember going into it, and I mean, there would be 50, 60 parents there, right? I mean, from across the city, like to get that kind of involvement every month, and then those parents are taking it back to their schools. But I think you're right. We had like a few years there of an almost authoritarian superintendent. So get involved. And as much as I wish some things had been different, as I said, the basketball for both my daughter and son, the football coaches made such a huge impact on my children that for those reasons we would do it again.
Well, Suzanne, I really appreciate you sharing this. I know we don't get that many opportunities in the media to have this in-depth discussion, and also to the participants, appreciate your feedback. We will continue to bring unusual people who have different points of view to share their points on helping us improve our community, our schools, our systems. And again, as I say, give people an opportunity to speak truth to power. So this is very important to us at more. And again, as we start to improve race relations and deal with these apartheid conditions and segregation that sometimes do not allow different groups of people, including low-income family members, in some of these circles of their elitism. So hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again, Suzanne, but really appreciate you being here today.
Absolutely.
Good. Folks, we will continue to bring different venues and interviews and so on, and grassroots folks. So again, we hope that you join us each week as we start to explore these issues, and again, bring a lot more discussion, focus, outcome issues that make us a better community. So we hope you've enjoyed this edition today of Throwing Out Some Heavy Light. Join us again next time. As we always end, may the force be with you. Baroko.